Hi guys, so some of you may have noticed the title of this series and possibly think that I've gone completely off my rocker. So let me tell you what the 12 months of Christmas is all about. Every year in our household we make gift baskets which we give to family, friends and neighbours at Christmas. And I think there's something truly wonderful about receiving homemade gifts. By their very nature, they show somebody that they're worth your time and effort. So I'm going to share with you some of my makes and recipes, which by the end of the year will assemble into some of the most wonderful gift baskets, and also some goodies for you and your family too. We are going to be exploring many different crafts over the coming months, from mead making to beading, and of course some needle felting. You could choose to have a go at some of the items, or you can have a go at them all. It's entirely up to you. Some of the makes will require extra equipment, and everything will be listed out on the website. But this is a great way to get a jump on things, and it takes a lot of the stress out of what is a very busy time of year. Recipe sheets and downloads can be found on the Mums Makery website. That's mumsmakery.co.uk. And please do just take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, as we will be bringing you a new episode each month. So sit back and let's take a delicious and crafty journey together over the next 12 months. Hi guys, and welcome back to my kitchen for the next episode of the 12 months of Christmas. And today in the Makery I'm going to be making mead, and making mead is something that I absolutely love doing, and I have been making it for many years now. I put it as a gift in small bottles in my gift baskets because it's something quite unexpected, I think, that people really appreciate, and it's not as difficult to make as you might think. So what I'm going to do is take you through step by step the mead making process. So this episode may be a little bit longer than the others, but I'm going to give you the confidence to actually make your own mead at home for yourself or for your gift baskets. Now, mead does need time, which is why I start making it at the beginning of the year. And what I do is I sort of have a rolling system going. So the mead that I'm making this year will actually go in my sort of Christmas baskets next Christmas, because I like to mature my mead over a couple of years, when I find that it really becomes very full flavoured. Some mead that you make can be ready within about 8 or 9 months, so you can make it now ready for this Christmas. And I'm going to go through the basic sort of equipment. I'm going to give you a really good solid base recipe for the mead, which I think you're going to love, and it's one of my absolute favourites. There are lots of different things that you can do with mead after the fact, like adding fruit to it to create melomels. But I'm not going to go too complicated in this episode, and we might create another episode at some point covering different things that you can do with the mead. Now, for those of you who don't know what mead is, it's probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest, drinks in the world. It's mainly based around honey, and it's very sweet, obviously, and absolutely gorgeous. So let's get stuck in, and I'm going to give you a quick sort of overview of everything that you're going to need for the basic recipe. So the ingredients for this recipe: you're going to need 2 kilograms of honey, the juice of 1 lemon, 4 tea bags, a cinnamon stick, 3 to 4 cloves, 1 pack of yeast, and that's wine yeast, not baking yeast, and you're going to need 1 teaspoon of yeast nutrient. So there's some equipment that you're going to need in order to make your mead. The first thing is a demijohn. And a demijohn is about 1 gallon, which is about 4.5 litres. And it will create probably 3 to 4 wine bottles of mead. Other equipment that you will need is an airlock, and this fits into one of those sort of rubber bungs. A thermometer is a good idea. A long one particularly, because you want to be able to get down into sort of the middle of the demijohn. You will need a funnel, a bottle brush for cleaning the demijohn, and this is optional, but a strip thermometer is good because you want your mead when it's fermenting to be at a certain temperature range. So these sort of strip thermometers you can just pop on the side, they stick on the side of the demijohn, and you can look at what the temperature is doing. In addition to the equipment, you will need some wine bottles with some sort of airtight corks or tops. I generally use the ones with corks rather than metal lids. That's just my personal preference. I have no idea if a metal lid would make any difference whatsoever, but around 4 to 5 wine bottles. You know, you can save bottles that you already have, or you can get them online. And finally, I have a siphon tube. You can, once the mead is fermented and it's all ready to be bottled up, you can use a siphon, or you can use a pouring technique. I find that the siphon is easier, but you know, whatever you want to go. And however much you want to invest for your first mead making expedition, you know, you don't have to have a siphon. You can use just a tube. I've got the siphon because I make so much of it. So the first step in mead making is probably the most important step, and that is making a cup of tea. And what you're going to do is, I just use what I call a standard builder's mug. 4 tea bags, and you want black tea because what we're using the tea bags for is the tannins, and black tea is higher in the tannins. So anything like your PG Tips, your Tai Fu, or just your Happy Shopper tea bags, anything like that will do. These are some kind of own brand tea bags that I got. So 4 tea bags in the cup, and then just top up And what you're going to do is you're going to let that infuse and stew and sit to one side and cool right down. So I do this first because when we do everything else, it's giving all of this time to cool down. So just leave the tea bags in the cup, pop it to one side and wait until the tea's gone cold. So the next step in mead making is actually the most important step, and that is sterilisation. And it is absolutely key. You want to make sure that you have everything that you are going to use completely sterile. And I'm going to go through that with you now. The first thing that I do is wash everything that can be washed with hot soapy water, and then rinse it. Rinse it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. You want to make sure that you don't have any of your sterilisation fluid or powder left on any of these surfaces, because that will kill the yeast that we're going to be using to make the mead. So good hot soapy water, get all of the grease off of anything that you're going to be using, rinse, 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 and then we're going to be using the sterilisation powder. This one that I got is from Wilko's. There are a lot of different types, but make sure that you read the back of the packet and follow the directions. This one's very simple to use. I'm going to fill my demijohn with 4.5 litres of warm, not hot, but warm water. Put in the required amount of powder and give it a stir, and then it just gets left for about 15 minutes. What I'm then going to do is in a bowl or bucket or whatever you have to hand, I'm going to use the same sterilisation process and sterilise all of my other equipment. So my spoon, my siphon, I've got my lemon juicer in here, I've got my airlock in here, my thermometers in here, everything that can be sterilised in this bucket, and that will go through the same procedure. So my steriliser requires 4 teaspoons of the powder in the bottom of the demijohn, and then topped up with warm water. So I have filled this right up to the top, and my sterilisation fluid needs this to sit for about 10 minutes. And once you have let it sit for 10 minutes, there we go, I'm going to use, funny enough, you actually use this part of the spoon, not this part of the spoon. Give it a good stir and just let that powder, sterilisation powder, just dissolve into the water and let it sit for about 10 minutes. I'll fill my bucket with warm water as well. The same ratio. This is 4 teaspoons of powder to 4.5 litres of warm water, and I'm going to get everything sterilised from my bucket as well. Once this has been sat, then you want to rinse, rinse, rinse again. You want to make sure that there is absolutely no chance that there is any sterilisation fluid left on any of your equipment, because that will kill your yeast. What we're going to do now is, now we've got our sterilised demijohn, we're going to start adding the ingredients, and the first thing that you add is the honey. Runny honey is best, something that is at room temperature, but if you do have honey that has crystallised, just warm it up. You don't want it too hot, but you do want it to be warm so that it can be poured. And if it's got crystallized bits in it, don't worry. All of that comes out later on. The yeast is going to feed on that sugar in the honey, and some honeys can be up to 70% sugar. So, you know, it doesn't matter if it's completely runny, but you do want it at least pourable so that you can get it into your demijohn. One way that I have made mead before is to make the actual mix in a sterilised bucket and then pour the whole mix into the demijohn. I just prefer to do it this way, I think, but it is entirely up to you. So the different types of honey that you can buy will affect the taste of your mead. I'm using Rouse because this is a very good staple honey. It's from my basic mead recipe. You can use honey from a local beekeeper. We also use honey from a beekeeper here in Bristol, but I'm going to make it with this one because this one is readily available pretty much everywhere. This particular honey is in a 3.5 kilo tub, and we're going to want 2 kilos of that. So I'm going to pour it directly into my demijohn using my funnel. So that's my 2 kilos of honey in the demijohn, and that took forever. A word from the wise, use a funnel with a bigger neck on it. The next thing that goes into the demijohn are the sort of the spices. So you can put up to 6 cloves in your mead. I'm not a big fan of clove, and clove can be quite a powerful taste. So I'm only going to use 3 or 4 cloves in my mead. So we're just going to pop the cloves, 3 cloves and 1 cinnamon stick. So once you've got the cloves and the cinnamon stick in, the next thing we're going to do is add the fermentation aids, and that's the sort of the acid that we're going to get from the lemon juice. And then we're going to pop in that half a mug of very strong tea. Okay, so that's all of our spices and the fermentation aids in. Now what we're going to do is add the water. You want your water to be warm but not hot, so definitely not over 30 degrees. Anything over 30 degrees and you really are going to kill off your yeast. It's going to be too hot. So I would get some water that is around 23, 25 degrees, something like that, maybe 25 to 27. You certainly don't want to be anywhere near that 30 mark at this stage. So I've put enough water in, and it's just below the neck of the bottle. Then I'm going to grab my spoon and use it that way up and start giving things a mix, because you want that water and honey to mix together. This will take a little bit of time, but Just slowly keep moving it about. So once all of your honey is completely incorporated into your water, it's going to be a lot easier to stir. It's taken me a few minutes, but just keep turning your bottle and looking down, right down in the bottom, just to make sure that there aren't any sort of layers of honey left. And look at that colour, it's absolutely gorgeous. Okay, the next thing that goes in, which is the final thing, is the yeast. And I'm going to quickly talk to you about yeast. So here I have 3 different types of yeast. This D47 is a classic mead making yeast, and it produces a very good mead. The EC 1118, this is a champagne yeast. And then I have some Wilko's white wine yeast. Now I've used all 3 of these with the same recipe that you see that we've used today. And the results are actually really surprising. The champagne yeast, if you do want to go that route, this will require a little bit longer to ferment. It probably takes between a good 1 to 2 years before it really comes into its own. This one was good in about 8 to 9 months, but really came into its own sort of a year, 18 months. And the same with this one, again, good after 8 to 9 months. So, you know, you can play around. The different yeasts really do produce a different flavour in the mead as well. The other thing that I add in to my mead when I add the yeast is this yeast nutrient, which again, I got from Wilko's, but you can get, you know, you can get them online. And I'm going to add in a teaspoon of the yeast nutrient and 1 packet of the yeast. And I'm just going to go for the Wilko's wine yeast because it's readily available. And then 1 teaspoon of yeast nutrient. And my teaspoon measure doesn't fit in this little jar, so I'm going to put in 2 half teaspoons. Once your yeast and yeast nutrient are in, just very carefully just give your bottle a little bit of a jiggle, and this will help everything sort of mix up. You can go back in with your little spoon and give it a bit of a mix up. But that's everything nicely incorporated in the bottle. Now what you would need to do is fit the airlock. And the airlock is generally sort of 3 pieces. You've got your rubber bung, you've got your airlock, and then there is a cap. Do not put the cap on because we need the air bubbles to escape. So these are the only 2 parts that we need. Both have been sterilised. So the first thing I'm going to do is just pop a little bit of water into my airlock. And you just want it about halfway. And then I'm going to put that into my rubber bung. Fit it nicely, and then all of that gets pressed down into the neck of the bottle. And as the fermentation process happens, you're going to see that this is going to start blipping air, sort of air bubbles out, and that's how you know that it's fermenting. So you want to place the demijohn in a warm place. The optimum temperature is between 20 and 27 degrees. Brewing will be faster at a warmer temperature. However, you don't want it too hot because that will kill off the yeast. Below 20 degrees, your fermentation will be really, really slow and could take many months. However, if the temperature can be kept constant, you should have optimal fermentation in probably about a month, maybe a little bit less. Next to a radiator or a warm part of the house should be sufficient. You can get dedicated heaters, both heating mats and blankets and things. You can wrap a towel around it. I've done that before. You know, you can look up all of these things on the internet. What I've done is I went ahead and I made myself a little demijohn kind of bag, and let's pop that. It's got some sort of thermal fabric in, and then there's just some nice fleece with a drawstring neck. And I find that this keeps it really quite nice, particularly because obviously the water in here at the moment is quite warm. So I'm just going to pop it into its little jacket. So there we go. It's all nicely in its little snuggie. And I'm just going to tie that off and wait for the magic to happen. This would probably take about a month. Once the fermentation process is really going, it will be blipping away, this little airlock, and then it will slow down and slow down and slow down. And then you may get a blip every sort of 10-15 minutes. Once it really has stopped fermenting, you can add sort of a finishing which will stop the fermentation process. So this is a fermentation stopper, and you just, when you think it's ready, when you're done, you just pop that in, follow the directions on the packet of whichever one you use, and it will stop that fermentation process. You may have to leave it a day or so, but again, read the packet directions. Once that has happened, so this is an optional step, and I sometimes put in finings, and what this does is this helps sort of get all of the sediment and bits that are in the mead, and it just drags them all to the bottom. This makes siphoning off a good couple of bottles, 3 bottles of the mead, very clear. That really helps with that. It's optional. You should be able to get a good couple of bottles of very good clear mead out of the top. You just don't put the siphon down quite so far near to the bottom. I always find that my bottles have sediment in the bottom, and you know, you can rebottle them again to take the sediment out. You know, you go as far with it as you want. Out of 1 demijohn, you are likely to get 4 bottles. As I said, the more mead that you take out of the demijohn, the more sediment you're going to pick up. If you don't mind that, which I don't, then that is also fine. The longer you leave it in the bottles, it will get better and better and better. I've got a demijohn over here which has been fermenting for over a month now, and I'm going to show you my bottling process. So in true Blue Peter style, here is one that I made earlier, and this one's slightly different. This was an Applejack mead that I made because we had such a glut of apples on our Bramley apple tree that we were running out of things to do with them. So we decided that we'd make mead with it. And this has been fermenting for well over a month. It has stopped. It has had the fermentation stopper in it, so there is no more fermentation happening now. And as you may be able to see, the sediment is very definitely all in the bottom of this jar. So what I'm going to do now is remove the airlock and remove the bung, and then we're going to start siphoning out into bottles. So in order to use a siphon, this is my siphon, which comprises of this rod and sort of the intake. So this goes in the demijohn, and what I would do to start with is put it only down about this far. Then you have the tube, and this one has a little tap on the end, so you can turn it on and off to stop the flow as you switch bottles. I don't have enough height here to demonstrate this on the table, but you would have this held in the demijohn and probably go nearer the floor. I would do it from this counter sort of to almost the floor level, and you suck the liquid up and through, and as soon as it gets over that top bend, gravity will do the rest and you can just pour it out into your bottles. I'll get some footage of the siphoning process, but I can't get this up high enough here. So we'll see what we can sort out, but that's the general idea of the siphon. Will it work? Sort of. Yay! Hurrah! So I don't know if you guys can actually see Pete or not, but he's like up there holding the siphon. There we go. So that's bottle number 1. This tap really is invaluable, otherwise you've got to stick your thumb over the end. So that's bottle 1. As I've mentioned before, the siphon is only halfway down the bottle, just over, so that I'm not picking up any of that sediment. And look at the clarity on that. That's just absolutely beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and decant the rest, and then we'll come back and see how much mead we've got. Okay, so after the decanting fiasco that was everybody up on stools and all kinds of good fun, when you're doing your mead, I would bank on getting 4. You get 2 very good sort of siphons off, because that's in the top part of the bottle where there's very little sediment. A 3rd one, you get a decent pour from it. The 4th one, that's when you're starting to get into the sediment territory, but I actually managed to get a 5th as well. The mead was quite clear. I've taken a Sharpie and I've just written on the back of the bottles what they are. I've also numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, so I know in what order they came out of the demijohn. And now we just leave them in a cupboard for about nine months, something like that. When you do your bottles, you will want to have yourself a little spare bottle, and this is my taster bottle. This is sort of what I use to gauge when I think that the mead has reached sort of its optimum taste. So that's actually a smaller bottle than I usually end up with. I usually end up with about half a wine bottle, but oh dear. So in this one, I've got this little bottle, and I'll be using that to just taste test it over the next sort of 9 months. Once it gets to about 9 months, a year, you're really looking at some very, very nice flavours. And again, the longer you leave it, I have had mead bottles like this just sat there for 2 or 3 years, and the flavour of them now is absolutely amazing. So that's how many bottles that I got out of my Applejack mead. You can see there's still a bit of liquid left in the bottom here as well, but this is very, very close to the sediment. So I think that I would call that part a bit of a write-off. I will taste test it again in 3 months. Again, it's 6 months, and then at 9 months. You know, just as and when you feel you want to. Don't open your main bottles, just use your taste tester. So that is it. That is how I make mead. I hope that you've enjoyed it. It's certainly been quite the experience trying to record doing it, but I think we got there in the end. So this was a lot of fun for us, and I hope you have enjoyed it too. So I will look forward to seeing you in the next show.